Alrighty, Exiles! It's the day before the new league, and I figured I'd do what every other good creator does and wax poetic on why I just spent the last week making build guides for skills that may or may not be great anymore and what I plan to be playing myself instead. So the main purpose of this video is to just do a quick rundown of each of the starter builds I've done this week and explore more into why I chose them and maybe note down any major pitfalls to look out for. One thing to consider is I, like most content creators, plan these builds long before the patch notes are ever released because there's simply no way I'm going to get more than one build done 48 hours before the league hits. This means that some of the builds, or at least parts of them, may have changed dramatically the closer we get to league start. The hopes is that this video provides some addendums and changes where necessary, but the main caveat to consider is that all of these builds are league starters. They are not an end-all, be-all definitive build. They are designed primarily to get you into early red maps to generate some currency to try a more preferred build, and you don't need as much DPS to do that. That isn't to say they can't be made to work all the way up to tier 16 bosses, just that this isn't my main goal for them. So, with all that out of the way, let's get started, shall we? Exsanguinate was a skill I tried out sometime mid-ultimatum and thought it was fine but not really suited for high tier endgame progression, making it a prime candidate for league start material. Dot builds in general are good as league starters because they can do respectable damage throughout the atlas and their primary downfall shows more on endgame bossing. Unlike other dot skills though, Exsanguinate is a close quarter, short duration stacking debuff. Maintaining this debuff can get difficult in harder content without significant investment in cast speed, and therefore makes this skill much riskier to use in other dot skills like Vortex or Essence Drain. I went Petrified Blood in Lowlife to try and scale the damage because, generally speaking, killing an enemy before they kill you is a much better strategy to survive in Path of Exile than trying to go pure tank is, and frankly I don't see that changing in 3.15. Dropping Petrified Blood and going full life, however, is fine. This will have a higher effective health pool at the expense of damage. You could, however, drop Mind Over Matter and the Devouring Diadem Helmet while keeping Petrified Blood, as that is also tankier once you have the Ivory Tower without sacrificing as much damage. However, I'm sure most of you are more interested in how the patch notes changes things. Ultimately, the build remains the same, but the lice cost is fucking nutso. The damage loss sucks, sure, but relative to the nerfing of every other build in the game, it's really not that bad. It's the fact that most Exsanguinate builds will now cost 300 plus life per cast, which is freaking insane. Other than that, trigger wands now spend mana when they cast a skill. This shouldn't be a huge deal as we don't spend mana on anything else really, but self-casting is a viable option and something you'll be doing anyway until you get the wand. Toxic Rain is a solid skill all round and there are numerous ways to go about building it, but most of them are the same. If you've seen my Pathfinder version then you'll be familiar with my Trickster variant as it's almost identical in setup. Raider is also a viable option from what I've seen, but as I haven't tried it I can't really comment on it. I went Trickster over Pathfinder so I could properly showcase the differences as I got a few questions about this on the Pathfinder variant. The short version is that Trickster is significantly cheaper to get started than Pathfinder, making it inherently easier as a league starter. It used to be that Pathfinder scaled better once you had good gear, but if your intention is to use this build up until you make enough money to play something else, then Trickster will be better for you. One major addendum to the build I made is I forgot that the AoE scaling was changed in 3.14, so it really only affects clear speed. This means Carcass Jack isn't as hugely important as it was, and Kintsugi is likely the better option. This also means the gap between Trickster and Pathfinder is nowhere near as large as it used to be. For the patch notes, this build was not hit as hard as other builds were. The support gems stay basically the same, with efficacy being even better now with the added duration bonus. We replaced Swift Affliction with either increased duration or faster attacks. Take your pick. The mana costs are the main issue, as usual. They're an issue for every build. I fucking hate them. I think it is a terrible mechanic to have to balance around and it's a massive pain in the ass. Suffice to say, anything that can reduce your mana cost you'll want a ton of, from the crafting modifier to maybe something like Replica Conqueror's efficiency, which will probably be expensive as shit. Asanav's chant may or may not work anymore. We used it to automatically trigger Despair when we used Toxic Rain, providing a sizable damage boost, but since trigger effects now cost mana, that may not be as easily done. In general, giving up Flesh and Stone for more mana is probably necessary. As an A-side, Toxic Rain leveling should be made a bit smoother by using Ballista Totem with Toxic Rain alongside normal Toxic Rain, so that's great at least. The Seismic Cry change is the obvious big nerf to this build, but again I don't think it matters for league start shenanigans, especially when literally every build is being nerfed to some degree, but it's something you should be aware of. I chose Earthshatter because I wanted to do a slam build and I didn't want it based around damage over time like Earthquake often is, because I do a lot of dot-based builds already. For the most part, you can just mix and match other slam skills if you want. Earthshatter is just the most fun for me. Juggernaut is the straightforward, easy option, but you could go Duelist if you wanted, or hell, even Chieftain and use Tectonic Slam. Really, the only consideration you have to make is how much you like spamming buttons. If you don't like the idea of a rotation in Path of Exile and having to cycle between Warcry and attacking, then you may not enjoy most slam builds. Despite the 40% buff to Earthshatter, all the other nerfs still hit us really hard. Seismic Cry is no longer worth using, and the Impale support gem was hit incredibly hard, so I've changed it for the new increased crit strikes one. And of course, as with other builds in 3.15, the mana costs suck. We are dropping Dread Banner in the endgame because the mana costs are just too much to deal with, and we're picking up some Mana Leech on the tree instead. If you can get Mana Leech anywhere else, then absolutely do so. Overall, when it comes to my starters, I'd say Toxic Rain is the least changed comparatively. In my opinion, the biggest issue with the changes in 3.15 is mana. Virtually every major support gem has had its multiplier dramatically increase, and so figuring out how to actually pay for your skills will probably be the hardest part and feel the worst. I genuinely despise the mana changes. Unless you're an attack build, mana is already a real pain in the ass to build around, and it's just not fun not being able to do anything or having to spam mana flasks to make up for it, which doesn't even work all that great on bosses. Dot builds have less issues with this because you often don't spam them willy-nilly, with Exsanguinate being the obvious exception. Earthshatter should hopefully not feel too bad since we can just use Mana Leech. Toxic Rain is, I don't know. The build itself is great with DPS, but the mana cost might make it feel awful. I don't know yet. So with all that out of the way, what am I going to do then? Because I'm not going to play any of those builds, obviously. I just spent a good few weeks setting them up to make a video about them all, so naturally I want nothing more to do with them for at least another 2 leagues. In that vein, I was looking at Forbidden Rite, one of the new skills teased with the League trailer. While we didn't get a long look at it, the gem info looks pretty solid. The base damage looks alright, with opportunity to scale it even more via life and energy shield. Now, it's obvious, at least to me, that GGG intends it to be used with Chaos Inoculation, given both how it functions and the fact that that's how they showed it being used, but I'm more interested in a Lowlife variant to try and exploit the fact that it deals damage to the player, meaning it should hopefully trigger cast when damage taken and other such juicy things. I don't know how the hell we're going to afford cast when damage taken now that the triggered skills will cost like 3 times the mana, but I'll figure it out. Alternatively, a hybrid option using some variant of Mind Over Matter and Eldritch Battery could work quite nicely. As far as league starts go, this is probably a fucking terrible idea, and really I should just go traps or totems or something, but I don't like any of those playstyles, and if I go witch, I can just change to something better down the line, so bugger it, let's do it. Hell, that Winter Gym got buffed to shit in the last week, so maybe we'll just do that, I don't know. All in all, Expedition is looking like a league. It is a thing that exists, and I will be playing it on the day of the launch as some build or another. If you have any questions or comments about one of my builds, or just want to talk shit, then feel free to join me on launch day as I prepare to get my ass reamed by Brutus for a live audience, cause who knows how that's gonna go down now that Act 1 is supposedly harder. In any case, that's it from me fellas, take care, and I'll see you all next time.